And here we go. So I'm outside with the R5 live streaming live. Now you probably only have one side of audio because I'm like trying to use like this old microphone that I have, and I didn't want to like mess with what I'm used to, but I should have actually brought one of my other microphones. But welcome, we're live streaming with the R5 and we're talking about the GH5 Mark II and the GH6, like, I guess, development announcement. Now, the GH5 Mark II is something of kind of like a hold you over type of camera. The GH5 Mark II has got some exciting features, but nothing too new that will get you too excited about the camera. So they say if you have a GH5 already, you should probably still be okay with using the GH5 and going from there. So now, again, because I'm broadcasting live, there'll probably be some distractions. I got New York City behind me, but also people walking behind me, so I'll try to be as respectful as possible. And if we need to, we'll get up and walk. And I don't know how well my connection will be, but I'm hoping it's going to stay steady because I'm also outside using my network. So, all right, so let's talk about the GH5 Mark II first before we talk about the GH6. So GH5 Mark II, as I've stated before, it has 4K 60p at 10-bit 422, which you didn't get on the original GH5. But one of the exciting features that I didn't originally know, and that was announced with this camera, was the fact that you can live stream mobile. So the GH5, and to explain, the GH5 will have the ability to connect to a Wi-Fi network and pretty much push a live stream directly to whatever service you tie to it. Now you got to put in the URL information, whatever, but it'll go from there. Kids are playing behind me, but when you use that, it'll actually be pretty good. Now I'm gonna actually start walking right now because I don't want it to get too busy, but that's the beauty of untethered live streaming. We can just go. So anyway, follow me. It's a little dark, but it's because it's nighttime and I've got the beautiful view of New York City behind me, so we'll just kind of go from there. See if you can actually see it. Check it out. See, that's, I'm just walking. I'm just gonna walk towards this street. Obviously, this thing is not tight enough. Sorry. Anyway, so I'll hold this in front of me, but GH5 Mark II's live streaming capabilities actually outperforms my setup right now, only because my setup right now needs wires, and I would rather be in a setup. Where can I get good lighting? I would rather be in a setup where I don't need to depend on wires. So, because I've got an HDMI cable hooked up to USB to my phone to be able to stream. Now, granted, that means less wires that you need to like connect everything, right? Because everything's gonna just work. But in this case, it's you know, it's a bit flawed in the fact that if like the cable hits something, boom, I'm in trouble, right? So if anybody comments on this video, I'll be able to see it live too, even though I'm kind of outside hanging out, sitting on a bench now, and I hope you can hear me. So that's the one thing about live streaming. Anything can happen. But the stabilization is also going to be slightly improved on the GH5 Mark II, and the autofocus is improved. I saw Tony Northrup's video on GH5 performance of autofocus, and it actually did look pretty good. It wasn't perfect in low light. He ran a quick test on it in low light, and it wasn't great, but it actually did pretty well. Now that's why I kind of appreciate full frame, even from Panasonic or from Canon, because full frame perspective gets you better performance in low light as long as you have a good lens hooked up to it. So, but at least it's there to tide you over. If you want a cheaper alternative, with 4K 60, with live streaming capabilities, with pretty good autofocus for like $1,700. GH5 Mark II is something to look at, and they introduced a new lens, I believe, as well. So that's pretty interesting too. So that whole setup can actually work, especially if you've got that going for you. But the downside to that is it's not full frame, and that's where I think it's its biggest handicap, is that a full frame probably would have worked out better, and it didn't. So, kind of dodging traffic over here. So, what's left, right? Well, the fact that it's live streaming capability directly is something that's exciting, something that I'm using right now, and it's a great idea, and it's nice that they implemented it all in a camera and it could wirelessly connect to your phone. So moving on to the GH6 spec announcement. One of the most interesting things about the GH6 and its micro four thirds sensor is the fact that it can do 4K 120 frames per second, which is something that most developers are offering right now, but it's also going to do, I believe, 5.7K up to 60 frames per second. So that's a high resolution, slow motion frame rate that the camera is going to offer, which I don't believe anyone is offering yet at such a high frame rate. Granted, you have 8K at 30 frames per second, but the high frame rate pretty much topped out at 4K for most settings. So that's kind of the deal there. I'm interested to see what else that they do with this. It's probably going to use the depth by defocus as well, autofocus, so they're still not going to use like a dual pixel autofocus for the camera, which is kind of a shame. I mean, it would make sense if they did, but that's Panasonic for you. They want to stick to what they know and what they trust. But finally, the last thing is that it's going to be introduced at an interesting price point. It's going to be something that's wanting to compete, but the reason that it doesn't interest me, and thanks for the comment, UD123123, cost is a factor for you as a hobbyist. Yeah, I mean, cost in itself, you can get a full frame alternative. For example, the Canon RP is, I believe at this point, less than $1,000, and has a flip screen. It doesn't have the high frame rates or the bit depth that Panasonic has, but if you're a hobbyist, you can still work with what you get off of the Canon RP. It doesn't have Canon log either, but then a little bit more, you can get the Canon EOS R, which would be comparable, if not slightly cheaper, than the GH6, and itself would offer 10-bit externally, but at least you have Canon log internally. You have a bit more features. It's a great photography camera, just a great all-around setup, and it's full frame. And you get to use RF lenses and Canon's EF lenses with an adapter. So for saving money, that actually works pretty well. So I think that is just an alternative that you can entertain, especially if you're working with that type of situation where you're trying to save money, but you want a good vlogging camera or a picture camera for photos. But GH6 and GH5 Mark II are not meant to be photography cameras. They're kind of meant to be vlogging cameras in general. So like the camera that I'm using to live stream vlog right now is meant to do both. It's a good hybrid camera. Is there an exit out of this playground, or am I stuck at a playground at night? That's kind of weird. I should not be going to a playground at night, but yet I did. Anyway, it's fun. This is fun. So those are my thoughts. Now, should you pick up the GH5 Mark II? I'd say if you own the GH5, there's no reason to. The features themselves, and if you want the live streaming at, live streaming with like a phone and stuff, it's already possible with your GH5 using a similar setup that I've got right now. It's a little bit more convenient off the GH5 Mark II, but is it really worth another $1,700 just to be able to live stream or get that little bit of extra bit depth or improved autofocus? Probably not, but that's it. And GH6, we'll wait and see, but for now, I still think there's more entertaining alternatives. Now I'm gonna get off of this noisy street and go home, so if you like this quick live stream, then let me know in the comments down below, because I'll just leave it uploaded, and hit me up. Okay, thanks as always. This is Magnus. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'm out. Bye-bye. I gotta hit a button here just to stop, but push.